My boss tried to frame me, but the security camera told the truth. Before we begin, let me ask you something real. Have you ever opened an email and felt your heart drop before reading the second line, not because you were guilty, but because something felt wrong, because someone was trying to bury you and you didn't even know why? This isn't a story about a misunderstanding. It's about betrayal, silence, and the one camera that told the truth when no one else would. It was late February in Calgary, that time of year where the snow doesn't fall gently anymore. It just hurts. I remember the way the wind hit my face that morning like it knew something I didn't. I walked into work the way I always did. Same gloves, same coffee, same quiet nod to Gary, the security guard at the west entrance. I'd been working for Pacific Med Supply for nearly 7 years, warehousing logistics coordination. Nothing glamorous, but I took pride in doing it right, every time. The warehouse was unusually quiet that morning. People greeted me, but their eyes didn't quite meet mine. I chalked it up to the cold. I wish I'd trusted my gut. Around 9:15, I got the email. Subject line Liam, urgent issue with shipment 1149. I opened it, expecting maybe a supplier delay, maybe something wrong with a barcode. But what I saw was a tone that made my skin crawl. We've identified a serious discrepancy with your documentation on order 1149. Please report to the conference room at 10:00 sharp. Mark. Mark was my direct manager, a guy who loved being in charge more than he loved doing things right. Still, we'd never had any issues before. I stared at the screen, confused. Order 1149. That number didn't even sound familiar. I dug through our system. No assignments under my name, no handoffs. I'd never even touched that file. But I showed up to the conference room anyway, because that's what you do when you're honest. You show up. The air inside was tight. Mark sat at the end of the table, arms folded. Next to him was Tasha from HR, clipboard in hand. The projection screen showed a document, a shipping manifest. I could already see my name typed neatly at the bottom, my signature, or at least something that looked like it. Mark didn't waste time. This is your signature on the shipment release for order 1149, dated February 12th. The wrong supplies were sent to a trauma unit in Red Deer. Over $12,000 in recalled product. I froze. I wasn't even working in that bay that day. I was assigned to inbound reconciliation at West Dock. Mark's lips tightened. Are you denying that this is your work? I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because I knew something they didn't. That day, February 12th, I had helped load a bulk shipment at West Dock. And West Dock was under constant video surveillance. Not the central building's cameras. Not Mark's department. No Gary's side of the building. Independent security coverage. Off-grid. Old school hard drive system. I knew, because Gary and I had joked about it just last week when one of the outdoor cams froze mid-blizzard. Mark kept pushing. Liam, mistakes happen. But what matters is accountability. The company's in the middle of a quarterly audit, and this issue has already been flagged. It hit me like a punch. They weren't investigating. They'd already decided. I looked down at the printed document, trying not to show the rage rising in my chest. Because I'd seen this before. When upper management needs to protect itself, it doesn't look for truth. It looks for a name to blame, and mine had just made the top of the list. I stayed calm, said nothing, just asked for a copy of the document and a moment to gather my own records. Mark looked irritated. He expected me to panic, to apologize, to fold. I didn't. I walked straight out of that room and headed to the West Dock. Gary was just finishing his sandwich in the little booth beside the loading gate. He raised an eyebrow when he saw my face. Bad day. You could say that, I muttered. You still keeping that camera footage from last week? He leaned back. Always. Why, I told him. The whole thing. No filters, no sugarcoating. He didn't flinch, just pulled out his key, unlocked the cabinet, and powered up the DVR. We scrolled to the afternoon of the 12th, and there I was, moving pallets, scanning barcodes, signing off on an entirely different set of orders. Every timestamp matched my report logs. Every second proved I had never been within 30 feet of that botched shipment. And then, another camera view. East Dock. Someone else. A younger employee. Alex Mark's new hire signing off on the box. Different handwriting, no gloves, no clipboard. And the kicker. A badge ID lanyard that was never mine. We copied the clip, exported it onto a USB. No drama, no commentary, just the truth in 1080p. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not out of fear, but out of frustration. How many other people had this happened to? How many just folded? Because they didn't have a camera. The next morning, I wrote an email to HR. 3 lines. Polite, direct, attach the footage. No explanation, no accusation. Just a note, this should clarify my involvement. Please confirm you've reviewed. And then I waited. Not for their apology, not for their approval, but for what came next. Because when the truth is on your side, you don't need to yell. You just need to let the evidence speak for you. The day after I sent that email, I walked into Shia's work like I always did. Same steel door, same black thermos of 2 strong coffee, same nod to Gary at the booth. But something was different. People looked at me again. Not in the warm, friendly way they used to, but not in the suspicious silence I'd felt for the past week either. It was something in between. Uncertainty. Like they suddenly weren't sure whose side they should have been on. And you know what? I understood that. I really did. When someone above you says Liam screwed up, most people won't question it. They'll just lower their heads and say, that's a shame. It's safer that way. But what they forget is sometimes the person they're whispering about knows where the cameras are. That morning, I didn't head to the warehouse floor right away. I went up to HR quietly without an appointment and knocked on Tasha's door. She opened it faster than expected, and for a split second, I saw it in her eyes. She'd watched the footage. Liam, she said, voice careful, come in. We sat across from each other like we had in the meeting 2 days earlier. But this time, there was no projection screen, no accusations, no Mark. Just her, a manila folder, and a legal pad she wasn't writing on. I reviewed the footage you sent. She began, her voice more measured than defensive. It does appear that you were not involved in the handling of Order 1149. I raised an eyebrow. It does appear. She paused. It clearly shows you were in a separate location the entire time. We also noticed a different individual authorizing the shipment. We're currently looking into it. I didn't press. I didn't need to. because the moment she said we're looking into it, I knew the tone had shifted. Mark's voice wasn't the only one in the room anymore. The video had spoken, and unlike Mark, it didn't flinch. That afternoon, something even more telling happened. Gary came to find me during lunch. He sat down beside me in the break room. No small talk. "You might want to know," he said, lowering his voice. "Mark came by the security booth this morning. Asked if I still stored footage locally. Said it was a security risk." He took a sip of his coffee, eyes not leaving mine. I told him yes. I also told him I'd already handed the file over to HR. He didn't look happy. I exhaled, slow and steady. "Did he say anything else?" Gary shook his head. "Nope." But he left fast. That night, I went home with a strange feeling in my chest. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was something close. Like standing in the eye of a storm and realizing the wind isn't pushing you anymore. I thought about Alex, the employee that we saw in the footage. He wasn't malicious, just inexperienced, probably scared, probably pushed. And I thought about Mark, the man who could have fixed everything with a 5-minute conversation, but chose instead to turn my name into a scapegoat. It wasn't just unfair, it was calculated. The next morning, I got an email titled "Meeting Request, Confidential." It was from Mr. Harrison, the Regional Operations Director, a name I'd only heard in memos and saw once in a Christmas party photo. The meeting was set for 11 Sirs a.m. Same room, same table, but this time, no Mark. Instead, Mr. Harrison sat at the head of the table, Tasha beside him, and to my surprise, Mason, our director of logistics, was also present. A quiet man, ex-military, famously allergic to drama. He nodded as I entered. "Liam, have a seat." Harrison cleared his throat. "We've reviewed the footage, the logs, and the digital signatures tied to Order 1149. We've also spoken to the individuals involved. What's clear is that you are not responsible for the error." He paused, as if waiting to see if I'd react. I didn't. I just listened. "We recognize the process by which this was handled fell short of our standards," he continued. "There will be internal restructuring in the coming weeks to address this." Translation: Mark had pushed too far, and now he'd be dealt with quietly, the corporate way. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need the drama. I had my name back. That was enough. But then Mason spoke. "You handled this with professionalism, with restraint. Most people would have taken it public. You didn't, and that speaks volumes." I looked at him and said the only honest thing I could. I just wanted the truth to speak for itself. The meeting ended quickly. No ceremony, no paper to sign, just a firm handshake from Mason and a quiet, "Well done." I walked back to the floor, slower than usual. People watched me now, but not with suspicion, with something else, something closer to respect. And that's when I realized the evidence hadn't just cleared my name, it had restored something deeper. That afternoon, Tasha stopped by my workstation and handed me a folded sheet of paper. "From upstairs," she said, "you're being transferred temporarily to Central Logistics Oversight and Compliance. They want your help identifying procedural gaps." I blinked. "Wait, me?" She smiled. Apparently, they think someone who doesn't miss details would be useful up there. I didn't say yes immediately, I just nodded, because that wasn't a reward. It was a responsibility. And while I wasn't looking for a promotion, I knew one thing for certain. When someone tries to bury you with a lie, there is no greater justice than rising quietly with the truth in your hands and the proof in your pocket. Some people think justice comes with fanfare, flashing lights, raised voices, public apologies. But the truth is, when real justice shows up, it's quiet, cold, surgical. It doesn't knock. It just walks in and starts moving furniture. That's what it felt like the day I stepped into Central Logistics. The office was different from the warehouse floor I was used to. Polished desks, glass panels, people in dress shirts and thin smiles. No one offered a chair. I wasn't invited in with clapping hands. I was assigned a small desk beside a flickering printer and told review these vendor logs. We want to tighten compliance before our quarterly audit. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why they brought me up here. I already knew. I was the guy who didn't fold. The guy who had proof. The guy they couldn't spin. But that didn't mean they welcomed me. At first, no one talked to me unless they had to. Emails were brief. Meetings were tight-lipped. It was like they weren't sure if I was a promotion or a punishment. But I didn't let that bother me. I had a job to do. So I dove into the files, shipment logs, vendor patterns, staff authorizations. After years in the warehouse trenches, I could spot a broken process the way a hunter spots tracks in fresh snow. Within 2 days, I flagged 4 inconsistencies. Not illegal, not malicious, just sloppy. Dangerous if left unchecked. I typed up a clean report and dropped it on Mason's desk without fanfare. The next morning, I walked into the office to find a hot coffee waiting on my desk. No note. No explanation. Just steam rising in the sunlight. And suddenly, people started saying good morning again. They weren't sure what I was. But now, they knew I wasn't a fluke. Meanwhile, downstairs, the silence around Mark was growing louder. Rumors swirled like wind through alleyways. He's on leave. He's being investigated. He took the fall for a bigger mess. Gary texted me one night. His key card was deactivated. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. There are moments where saying nothing says everything. 1 week into my new role, Mason called me into his office. The blinds were drawn, which he only did when something serious was about to be said. He slid a folder across the table. "Do you recognize this name?" I glanced down. "Alex Mark's assistant. The one in the video." "Yeah," I said. "I trained him for 2 weeks last fall." Mason nodded. He came forward. That caught me off guard. He admitted Mark pressured him to sign off on several shipments outside of protocol. He claims he didn't realize it would fall on you. Says he tried to speak up, but was shut down. I leaned back in my chair. Not angry, just tired. "He's young," I said. He panicked. "We've all been there." Mason studied me. "You're not pressing this, are you?" "No," I said. "What would it prove? I don't need someone fired. I just needed the lie undone." He smiled. Then not a wide grin, just the subtle kind people give when they realize you're not like everyone else. You know, he said they talk about integrity like it's a mission statement. But this is what it actually looks like. I left that meeting, not with more power, but with something better. Trust. 2 days later, I got a call from Tasha. There's a letter I want you to sign. This for you. And gently she handed me the envelope. Inside was a formal notice cleared of any wrongdoing. Internal procedures updated. Role reassigned voluntarily. And below that, a handwritten note from the regional director himself. Thank you for holding the line when others didn't. We owe you. It didn't erase what happened, but it mattered. That night, I went home, took off my boots, and poured myself a drink. I sat by the window and watched snow fall across the rooftops, quiet and honest, the way I'd always tried to live. I thought about all the people who get blamed for things they didn't do, the ones who don't have a camera, who don't know a guy like Gary, who don't get their names cleared. And I made myself a promise. If I was ever in a position to speak for someone like that, I'd do it, no matter the risk. The next morning, I walked into work and saw Alex by the elevators. He looked nervous, hands in his pockets, eyes on the floor. I nodded at him. You all right? He looked up, surprised. Yeah, I'm sorry. I know, I said. Do better, that's all. He nodded again, eyes watering. Thanks. Sometimes the best thing you can offer someone isn't forgiveness. It's the chance to forgive themselves. And just like that, the loop closed. The accusation, the silence, the video, the truth, the fall, and now, the rebuilding. Not for them, but for me. It's strange how quickly people forget the details, but remember how you made them feel. By the time my third week in central logistics rolled around, things had shifted. No announcement, no press release, just a quiet acceptance that I was there for a reason and I wasn't going anywhere. People started asking questions again, not the kind that come with suspicion, the kind that come with trust. Liam, can you review this supplier contract? Hey, do you have time to look at this manifest log? Quick gut check. Do you think this timeline's realistic? At first I answered simply, politely, but then I realized something. They weren't asking because they were lost. They were asking because I'd proven I wouldn't just throw blame. In a world where most people talk to cover their mistakes, being the one who listens becomes your quiet power. One Thursday morning, Mason stopped by my desk. No formality, no scheduled check-in. Coffee, he asked, holding 2 cups. I nodded. We stood by the window, both of us watching the snow start again, soft against the gray glass. He didn't make small talk. He just said, "They're watching you." In a good way. I raised an eyebrow. Who's they? He smirked. The board, senior logistics, even corporate compliance. They've been following the adjustments you've made to our intake processes. Nothing dramatic, just cleaner, smarter, less bureaucratic. I stayed quiet. He added, they want to know if you're open to something longer term. I didn't say yes, not right away, because truthfully, I wasn't chasing a title. Not anymore. I'd learned something the hard way. If the only reason they respect you is your title, they never really respected you. I told Mason I'd think about it, and I did. That weekend, I went hiking alone just outside Canmore. Took a familiar trail. Packed light. Let the cold bite through my jacket and clear my mind. Up there in that quiet white world, I thought about everything that had happened. Being framed. Being doubted. Fighting back without shouting. Earning trust in silence. And I realized it wasn't the promotion I cared about. It was the culture I wanted to shape. Because for every Liam who had proof, there were 5 others who didn't, who got crushed quietly, who left quietly, and no one ever asked why. If I could make the space a little fairer, a little more grounded, that would be worth staying for. When I came back on Monday, I gave Mason my answer. I'm in, but I don't want a corner office. I don't want my name on a plaque. I just want to keep things clean and teach the new ones how not to get crushed. He nodded, didn't even blink. You're the kind of leadership we need more of, he said. And just like that, I stepped into a new chapter. Not as a savior, not as some hero, just as a steady hand in a room full of noise. A few weeks later, we onboarded 3 new hires, young, bright, fast-talking. Reminded me of Alex in some ways. But this time, I didn't wait for them to make mistakes. I sat them down and told them the truth. You're going to mess up. It's part of the job. But here's what matters. Own what's yours. Protect what isn't. And if anyone ever tries to hand you a mistake that isn't yours, don't panic. Document everything. And come find me. They nodded, wide-eyed, but I could tell it stuck. Because what they saw wasn't just advice. It was a man who had lived it and walked back in stronger. And maybe that's the most powerful thing of all. Not to survive the storm, but to return quietly and make sure the next person doesn't get swept away. It was a Friday afternoon when it happened. I was in the break room, refilling my coffee, when I overheard one of the new hires whisper to another, "If anything goes sideways, just ask Liam. He doesn't throw people under the bus." I didn't say anything, just stirred the coffee, slowly letting the words land. They didn't know I heard, and that made it mean more. Respect isn't something you demand. It's something that accumulates quietly in the spaces where people feel safe around you. It's built when you're not performing when no one's watching, when doing the right thing costs you time but gains you trust. That moment was the full circle. Months earlier, I sat in a windowless room with HR accusing me of a mistake I didn't make. Now, I was the one people turned to, not out of fear, but because I stood still when everything else was shaking. And I hadn't forgotten what it cost to earn that kind of trust. Mark never came back. There was no dramatic email, no farewell speech. Just a ripple of silence followed by a new name on the organizational chart. Alex stayed. He worked hard, kept quiet, and asked questions. He didn't try to prove anything, just listened, showed up, and owned his learning curve. One morning, I pulled him aside. "Been where you are," I told him. "The only difference is, no one pulled me aside when I was your age." He looked at me nervous. "Why are you helping me?" "Because someone has to," I said. "And because I see the version of you that doesn't know it yet, but will be good, if you stay honest." He nodded, and I knew he got it. Later that week, Mason called me into his office again. The tone was more casual now, less like reporting up, more like talking across. He gestured to a printed agenda on his desk. "We've got a leadership offsite in Montreal next quarter. They want you to come." I raised an eyebrow. "Why?" He smiled. "Because, for once, they want someone in the room who actually knows what the floor looks like." I told him I'd think about it. Because that's the thing about surviving something like what I went through. You don't jump at every offer. You weigh it. You ask will. this take me closer to peace or further from it? The truth is, I didn't need validation from a panel of executives. I already had it in the way. Olivia brought me reports to double check, in the way Alex asked for advice without fear, in the way even the janitor nodded when I passed by. You can't fake that. You can't buy that. And once you've earned it, no one can take it. That weekend, I visited my sister in Edmonton. She'd been following the story loosely, knew I'd had a rough few months, but hadn't pried. Over coffee, she finally asked, "How did you not just lose it, Liam? I mean, someone tried to ruin you." I smiled. Because anger doesn't build anything. It just burns what's left. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted to stand tall, quietly. She shook her head. Still, not many people would have handled it like that. Maybe not. But then again, maybe I wasn't built to shout. Maybe I was built to last. And there's something powerful about knowing that knowing your worth doesn't come from whether they see it. It comes from whether you live it. Back at work, the following Monday, I walked past a group of new interns doing orientation. One of the HR staff pointed toward me and said, "That's Liam Carter. He's the reason our compliance training exists." They didn't mean it as a joke. I chuckled softly, because that's how legacy works. It sneaks up on you, not when you fight for it, but when you quietly become the story people tell to explain what right looks like. I still sit at the same desk, still drink the same coffee, still walk through the same door and nod to Gary, who always gives me that slow, knowing smirk, like he remembers every second of how this all started. And maybe that's what matters most. Not that I won, not that I moved up, but that I stayed me. The man who knew what he didn't do. The man who proved it without screaming. The man who refused to get bitter and chose to get clear instead. So if you're listening right now, if you've been wrongly blamed, if someone's trying to bury your name to save their own, don't panic. Don't lash out. Document everything. Hold your ground. Let the truth speak in full resolution. Because one day, they'll remember you not as the one who got accused, but as the one who couldn't be broken. And that they can never take from you. If this story resonated with you, share it. You never know who might be standing in that same silent room, just waiting for proof that they're not alone.